We keep being told today, John, even by the Liberals, that we can't be a progressive society or a good society or an enlightened society unless we are parachuting women into roles of power instead of allowing them to rise out of the merits of their own, coming through the jungle of politics on their own. It's why we have kittens instead of lions and house cats instead of panthers. But Margaret Thatcher, she should be the supreme darling of the feminist progressive movement. I mean, listen to this.
They don't seem to make any concession to the fact that you're a woman, do they?
No, why should they? I mean, I don't make any concession to the fact that they're men. No.
I mean, she did it all. She had a career, a family. She was a power woman who had both men and women quaking with fear. She was the most powerful woman heading up one of the most powerful nations on earth for nearly 12 years. I mean, she held the 7th longest term, keeping in mind that those who beat her were from the 1700s and the 1800s, and her term is certainly the longest in modern history. Look at Liz Truss. I mean, she barely made it 50 days or whatever it was. But even The Guardian, who hate all things conservative, called her a political phenomenon in their obituary, which is quite a stretch. Finally here today, John, why isn't she the most famous political and loved figure of the feminist movement?
Well, yeah, it's a very good point. Look, I mean, if feminism truly was what it claims to be about at face value, which is female empowerment, well, Margaret Thatcher should be their icon, okay? Because not only was she, as you just said, she was the longest-serving Prime Minister of the 20th century in Britain, and obviously Britain's a very important country, but she was the Conservative Party leader. Now, that Conservative Party in Britain, particularly in the 1970s, was really conservative in terms of socially conservative. They had a leadership challenge for the Tories in about 1963, and there was 4 or 5 contenders, and all of them went to Eton. Okay. Now, Margaret Thatcher was very much lower middle class. Her father owned a grocery shop, just a little corner shop. Okay, and she pulled herself up to get, and she lost pre-selection several times, but she had the determination, and she gets into Parliament, and she writes in the memoirs that she never thought she would be Prime Minister, but she just had this sort of unrelenting drive and policy convictions. When she gave her maiden speech, Alexandra, these maiden speeches are usually all about me, 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 me. They just want to talk about themselves all the time. Thatcher gives a maiden speech. She cut straight to the chase and talked about a really contentious bill at the time, because she wasn't there to talk about herself. She was there to change policy. So, it's a funny thing about the British. When the Romans arrived with Julius Caesar, the first thing that they noticed about the British is how prominent females were in this tribal society, which is what England was at the time. And England has who are the three best English monarchs of all time? All chicks. Elizabeth I, Elizabeth II, and of course Victoria. Okay, so England has always been a pretty pro-female country relative to everybody else, and to think that Margaret Thatcher can come up there in the 1970s and become the leader of the Conservative Party, win an election, and win 2 more after that, it just shows, what the feminists really should do, Alexandra, is they should say, thank you, England. You have been the beacon for lifting women up all around the world. But of course, they generally hate England because they hate what's good in the world.
They also hate powerful conservative women, I might add, probably because they go after socialism with such effective savagery. They're frightened that they might actually destroy it entirely. But just quickly, as a final question here, John, Thatcher had to make some difficult choices, and she had, to stay the course amid fierce media backlash, union resistance, and just an absolute hell, even from her own party room. Things weren't easy, especially compared to what we do today. But if she was to walk into Australia and see the absolute mess that we have managed to make of our country, where do you think she would start? What do you think would be her maiden speech topic if she had to come into Australia and fix up this mess that we're living in?
Well, that's an interesting question. Look, I think the first thing she would see, if she could sort of be in a time machine from 1979 to today, I think firstly she would be, rightly, very impressed with all of our technological advances thanks to capitalism, and she was the champion of capitalism. And she would see our stupendous national wealth, okay? But she would then also, so she'd be positive on the one hand. On the other hand, she would see that we are very poor spiritually and politically, that we've lost all of our courage. And so she would think that We have the veneer of being successful, but we are trending downwards because of weak leadership, weak political leadership. And, you know, we used to rely on the Liberal Party and the Conservative Party in England for good leadership. Well, you know, we've just come out of a long period of those two parties running the show and doing a terrible job. So this is why I hope people like Nigel Farage and the Libertarian Party in Australia. Now, in the United States, it's a bit different because, you know, we've got the Trump phenomenon, which we might talk about next time. But look, you know, England is still a very important. England will always be family with Australia, and there's a lot of affection between the two countries. So we wish England all the best, and the best way to wish England all the best is to get behind Nigel Farage, because he is the new Thatcher.
I think she might give some of our, like opposition leader Peter Dutton, a lesson on how to be humorous and to have some intelligent speeches and some fun with the media, because at the moment it's a bit dry in our political landscape and we haven't had any great quotes like the Thatcher quotes for some time, John. But look, that's all we have time for here. Thank you for joining me and for having a great chat about Margaret Thatcher. She's a wonderful woman, and I hope that the youth of today go to university and learn about Thatcher rather than how to stick themselves to roads for net zero. So thank you for joining us today, John.
Thanks so much.